Maybe you don't consider yourself an anxious person. You show up, you handle responsibilities, you meet deadlines. People might even describe you as calm, reliable, strong. But let me ask you something. Do you apologize for things that aren't your fault? Do you overthink simple messages before sending them? Do you feel guilty when you try to rest? Maybe you've told yourself, "That's just how I am." Maybe you believe it's your personality, your standards, your way of being careful. But what if some of these small habits aren't personality traits at all? What if they're subtle signs of a system that's been on alert for too long? Anxiety doesn't always look like panic. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It disguises itself as responsibility, as politeness, as productivity. As being easy to deal with, it becomes small, socially acceptable, hard to question. And that's why so many people live with it for years, without realizing what's happening underneath. Today, we're going to look at 7 small habits that most people think are normal, but might actually be signs that your nervous system doesn't fully feel safe. And by the end of this video, you may realize something important. You're not dramatic. You're not overly sensitive. You're not broken. You've just been trying to protect yourself. Let's begin. Have you noticed how easily the word sorry leaves your mouth? Sorry for being 2 minutes late. Sorry for asking a question. Sorry for speaking up. Sorry for taking up space. Sometimes you even apologize when someone bumps into you. And maybe you tell yourself that it's just politeness, that you're considerate, easygoing. Kind. But sometimes it's not just kindness. Sometimes it's anticipation. Apologizing before anyone has a chance to be upset is a quiet way of trying to control the room. It's like shrinking yourself first so no one else has to. Because somewhere along the way, you may have learned that conflict creates distance, that displeasing someone carries a cost, that being too much risks rejection. So your system it decided that staying small was safer. And anxiety loves that strategy. From its perspective, safety comes from reducing friction. If apologizing lowers tension, it becomes automatic. But there's a hidden consequence. Every unnecessary apology sends a subtle message inward. I am the problem. I am inconvenient. I should adjust. And over time, you begin to believe it. You feel guilty for having needs, guilty for expressing opinions, guilty for simply existing in a space without minimizing yourself. But apologizing for existing is not humility. It's hypervigilance. It's a nervous system that's scanning for disapproval before it even appears. And here's something important. You didn't develop this habit because you're weak. You developed it because it worked. It protected you. It avoided tension. It kept relationships stable. The problem is not that you adapted. The problem is that the adaptation became permanent. Because living in constant apologies, living in constant contraction. Maybe today you don't need to change everything. Maybe you just begin noticing. Notice how often sorry comes out when you haven't done anything wrong. Notice the impulse to shrink, because small habits reveal deeper patterns. And this one might be a sign that you've been trying to stay safe longer than you realized. Maybe no one notices this, but you do. You write the message. Read it once, read it again. Delete a word. Change the tone. Replace a period with ... Rewrite the whole thing. Did that sound weird? Will they misunderstand me? Was I too cold? Too much? What should take 10 seconds takes minutes, sometimes longer. On the surface, it looks like attention to detail. But underneath, it's something else. This isn't just careful communication. It's social hypervigilance. It's your brain trying to predict every possible reaction before it even happens. Because somewhere along the way, you may have learned that being misunderstood has consequences. That saying the wrong thing can create distance. That small missteps can turn into conflict. So you try to control what can't be fully controlled. You adjust every word to avoid rejection. But here's the problem. It never feels enough. There's always another possible interpretation. Another what if. Another scenario your mind wants to prepare for. And anxiety loves what if. It turns a simple message into a silent threat, not because the message is dangerous, but because your nervous system is trying to keep you safe in social situations. And here's the important part. You're not doing this because you're weak. You're doing it because you care. You want connection. You want to be understood. You want to avoid discomfort. That's human. But when the desire for connection turns into fear of judgment, communication stops being natural. It becomes tense. Every message becomes a test. Every pause in response becomes a story your mind tries to fill in. They're upset. I said something wrong. I shouldn't have sent that. Do you see it? The habit looks small, but it reveals something deeper. A system that's always trying to stay one step ahead to prevent pain. And living like that is exhausting. Always calculating, always adjusting, never fully relaxed in simple interactions. Maybe today you can try something different. Write the message. Read it once and send it. Not perfectly polished. Just honest. Because real connection doesn't come from perfect wording. It comes from imperfect presence. And you don't have to edit yourself to be worthy of being understood. You finally sit down. No deadlines. No urgent messages. Nothing demanding your attention. And yet, you can't fully relax. Your body is still tense. Your mind keeps scanning. There's a subtle voice in the background saying, you should be doing something. So you reach for your phone. Open another tab. Check your email. Start planning tomorrow. Rest feels uncomfortable. And maybe you've convinced yourself that this is just ambition, that you're disciplined. Driven, responsible. But sometimes it's anxiety. When your nervous system has been living in survival mode for too long, stillness doesn't feel safe. Movement feels safe. Productivity feels safe. Being useful feels safe. Because if you're always doing, you don't have to sit with uncertainty. You don't have to feel what's underneath. Anxiety often disguises itself as productivity. It tells you that slowing down is risky, that if you stop, things will fall apart, that your value is tied to your output. So even when there's nothing wrong, your system doesn't power down. It stays alert. And over time, this creates a quiet exhaustion, not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from never fully letting your guard down. But here's the truth. Rest is not laziness. Slowing down is not weakness. And your worth was never meant to be measured by how constantly you perform. The discomfort you feel in stillness isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that your system doesn't remember what safe rest feels like. And that can be RELEARNED. Very slowly. Very gently. Maybe today you don't need to fully relax. Maybe you just allow yourself one moment without fixing, improving, or preparing. One breath without doing. Because you don't have to earn rest. And nothing bad happens when you pause. Sometimes, the most courageous thing an anxious mind can do is sit still and realize the world doesn't collapse. You haven't even had the conversation yet, but you've already lived it 10 times. You imagine what you'll say, how they might respond, how you'll defend yourself, how you'll explain better, how you'll fix it if it goes wrong. In your mind, the scene plays over and over, different versions, different outcomes. And sometimes, by the time the real conversation happens, you're already exhausted. On the surface, this looks like preparation, like being thoughtful, responsible, emotionally aware. But underneath, it can be something else. It can be control. When anxiety senses uncertainty, it tries to eliminate it. It tries to predict every possible scenario so nothing feels unexpected. Because surprises feel dangerous, not physically dangerous. Emotionally dangerous. So your brain rehearses. If I say this, they might say that. If they react this way, I'll respond like this. It feels productive, but it's actually your nervous system trying to protect you from discomfort before it even exists. And here's the quiet truth. Most of the conversations you rehearse never unfold the way you imagine, because real connection is unpredictable. People don't follow scripts, and no amount of mental rehearsal can fully prevent emotional risk. But anxiety doesn't like risk. It prefers certainty, even if that certainty is imagined. The problem is, this constant mental simulation keeps your system activated. You're never fully present, never fully relaxed. You're always preparing for impact. And over time, that creates tension in your body, tight shoulders, shallow breathing, a subtle sense of pressure that never completely fades. You're not overthinking because you're dramatic. You're rehearsing because your system learned that being caught off guard hurts. But here's something gentle to consider. You don't have to win every conversation before it starts. You don't have to predict every reaction to stay safe. Sometimes the healthiest response is allowing a moment to unfold without controlling it, letting yourself respond in real time, imperfectly, humanly. Because safety doesn't come from perfect preparation. It comes from trusting that you can handle what happens. And you can, even if it's messy. You tell yourself it's not worth it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Let it go, even when it does matter. Even when something inside you feels hurt, or frustrated, or misunderstood. You choose silence. You soften your tone. You change the subject. You laugh it off, because tension feels unbearable. Conflict feels dangerous, not physically dangerous. Emotionally dangerous. Maybe you learned that disagreement leads to rejection. That speaking up creates distance. That asserting yourself risks losing connection. So your system adapted. It decided that keeping peace was safer than being honest. And at first, that works. You avoid arguments. You stay likable. You keep relationships stable. But over time, something else happens. You start abandoning yourself in small ways. You say yes when you mean no. You agree when you don't agree. You shrink your needs so they don't inconvenience anyone. And anxiety rewards that pattern. Because from its perspective, no conflict equals no threat. But the truth is, avoided conflict doesn't disappear. It just turns inward into resentment, into tension, into emotional distance. You're not too sensitive. You're not weak for wanting harmony. You just learned that safety comes from minimizing yourself. But real safety doesn't require self-erasure. Healthy connection can survive disagreement. And your voice doesn't automatically create abandonment. Sometimes the bravest thing an anxious mind can do is allow a small moment of discomfort and discover that the relationship doesn't collapse. You are allowed to take up space, even if your voice shakes a little. Nothing dramatic happened. No crisis. No visible disaster. No major problem. And yet, you're exhausted. Not just physically. Mentally tired. Emotionally drained. Like your system has been running for too long without shutting down. You wake up already tired. You go to bed wired but empty. And when people ask what's wrong, you don't really know what to say. Because technically, everything is fine. But anxiety doesn't need a visible emergency. It runs quietly in the background, scanning, preparing, anticipating. It checks for problems before they happen, replays conversations, predicts outcomes, keeps you alert even when there's no immediate threat. And that constant low-level activation costs energy. Your body doesn't fully relax. Your muscles stay slightly tense. Your breathing stays shallow. Your mind rarely rests. It's like living with an internal alarm system that never completely powers down. And over time, that becomes fatigue. Not laziness, not weakness. Fatigue from being in silent survival mode. The hardest part is that it doesn't look dramatic. From the outside, you're functioning, working, showing up. But internally, your system is tired of being on guard. And here's something important to understand. You're not tired because you're incapable. You're tired because your nervous system hasn't felt fully safe in a while. Constant alertness feels productive, but it slowly drains you. Maybe your exhaustion isn't a sign that you're failing. Maybe it's a signal that your system needs permission to power down, not perfectly, not all at once, just a little, because you were never meant to live in constant preparation mode. And the tiredness you feel might just be your body asking for safety, not more effort. If you've seen yourself in even one of these habits, this matters, because none of them are random. Apologizing too much, overthinking messages, feeling guilty when resting, rehearsing conversations, avoiding conflict, living tired for no visible reason. These aren't personality flaws, they're adaptations. They're strategies your nervous system learned to survive uncertainty. Anxiety doesn't always look like panic attacks. Sometimes it looks like being responsible, like being easy to deal with, like being productive, like being low maintenance. It hides inside socially acceptable behaviors. And that's why it's hard to see. But underneath every one of these habits is the same quiet pattern. Your system is trying to prevent rejection, prevent conflict, prevent mistakes, prevent discomfort. It's constantly scanning for what could go wrong. And when you live in that mode long enough, it stops feeling like anxiety, starts feeling like, this is just who I am. But it's not who you are. It's what you learn to do to feel safe. And here's something important. There is nothing broken about you. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. Protect. The problem is not that you adapted. The problem is that the protection never turned off. You kept preparing, even when there was nothing chasing you. You kept shrinking, even when no one asked you to. You kept performing, even when you were already enough. Awareness is the first shift. Not forcing yourself to change overnight, not shaming yourself for these habits, just noticing them. Noticing when you apologize unnecessarily. When you over-edit your words, when you avoid speaking up. And gently asking yourself, am I in danger or am I just uncomfortable? Because discomfort is not danger, and being seen is not the same as being unsafe. You don't need to eliminate anxiety to feel better. You just need to stop mistaking protection for identity. You are not your coping strategies. You are not your hypervigilance. You are not the version of yourself that learned to stay small. You are someone who adapted, and adaptation can evolve. Slowly, patiently, without pressure. Nothing is wrong with you. Your system just learned to survive, and maybe now it can learn to rest.